listening to Around the Northwest this Tuesday afternoon. Now, there is, excuse me, there is a new book out, a new history of Ireland, but an unusual one because the title is A History of Ireland in 10 Body Parts. It's written by Dr. Ian Miller, who's a senior lecturer in medical history at Ulster University. Maybe be able to do something for my throat. But anyhow, given the nature of this book, maybe not, or hopefully not. But anyhow, Ian is an author of 7 medical history books and joins us now actually on the line and on Zoom as well if you want to look in. Ian, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Now, there's loads of books about the history of Ireland, but you've taken an unusual approach in that it's through 10 different body parts.
Yeah, I really wanted to engage my audiences in a new and exciting way. As you mentioned, I'm a medical historian. I'd previously written books on the history of the stomach, and then I started to write books about Irish history. So I thought it'd be a great way just to combine the two in a way that's fun and engaging and accessible, not too academic. Uh, and yeah,
Well,
and I'm really pleased with the results.
yeah, well, I think it ticks all those boxes, and it's macabre and grotesque in places, but it's always fascinating, and it's and always interesting and very accessible, in that there's none of the passages too long, and it's some of it's fascinating, and I mean, have we been were we excessively cruel here in Ireland down through our history, or is that just the way it was?
I wouldn't say you were any more cruel than any other country, to be quite honest, at the time. I mean, it depends on your perspective. I guess obviously my book starts with the Clonacarbon man, and as many people know, he's one of the bog bodies in the National Museum of Ireland, and he was a quite well-to-do person, so it seems, but he was kind of killed in a sacrificial ritual and hit 3 times with some kind of heavy object, a hammer, before being ditched in the bog. So I guess my starting point is a little bit grim there,
Yes.
but these things are common across Europe and in many different places. So no, I wouldn't say it was any more crueler than
Okay.
anywhere else.
Okay. And I mean, the 10 body parts include things like skulls, heads, hands, legs, sex organs, and and stomachs. In the chapter on stomachs, you cover. You might think, well, what can stomachs tell us about the history of Ireland?
Mhm.
Well, it tells us because you go into detail about the Great Famine, and then about poaching and about whiskey, and you outline how actually Dublin was once the powerhouse in Europe when it came to making whiskey.
Yeah, I am a food historian as well, so the stomach chapter particularly appealed to me to write. Obviously, the famine was experienced in a very physical way, so that's part of the book as well. I also talk a lot about post-famine diets, which I think actually declined. Obviously, the potato diet was a very healthy diet. You've got most of your vitamins that you need, but after the diet, people became unhealthy, and people started to drink a lot of tea for the first time. So a lot of the story which I tell in that particular chapter focuses on how women in particular became addicted to tea. They didn't tend to eat much else. Maybe they'd have a bit of white bread, and that was all. But the story is really one of poverty and kind of health decline after the famine. So obviously we tend to think the 1850s, everything improved afterwards, people ate a more varied diet, but that wasn't the case. And a lot of that resonates today, I think, with all our current discussion of food poverty and families not being able to buy enough food. So there are a lot of fun stories in the book, such as the idea of people getting addicted to tea, but there's a very serious side as well, I think, to people's lived experience.
Yeah. And that serious side is touched on in the chapter on corpses, because in that you write about wakes and about body snatching, and you tell the story about the two Williams, William Burke and William Hare. So remind us of that.
Well, at the time, anatomists were looking for bodies to go and dissect and to find out more about how the body works, which is great. But of course, the main problem is where do you get all the bodies from? And particularly poor people were very, very vulnerable to having the graves robbed and the bodies taken away and dissected. So Edinburgh was a huge medical centre at the time, and Burke and her were from the north of Ireland, but off they went to Edinburgh, living in poverty. They decided to speed the process up, so by killing people essentially, and then offering this remarkably fresh corpse to the anatomist who would pay them more if it was fresher. Obviously, they got caught, but only after I think it was about 10 bodies or something like that, including a lady from Donegal. Um, so one of them got hanged, and the other disappeared into the night, and we don't know what happened to him. Of course, the doctor who paid him, Robert Knox, never got prosecuted. He continued to have a very lively career from well into the 1840s and onwards. So he kind of got away with it, even though he was the main cause of the problem to begin with.
And is it true that one of them is still on display in a museum in Edinburgh?
Yeah, as part of his punishments, it was decided that not only would he be hanged, which was quite common back then, but his body would be put on display, kind of almost as a form of public humiliation,
Yeah.
I guess, and a kind of sick justice, which maybe had some comfort for the families whose relatives were murdered by the two men.
And I mean, executions are covered and beheadings covered as well in the chapter on skulls. But I noticed in the chapter on hands, you write about everything from wedding rings to the red hand of Ulster, and also St. Patrick. So
Yeah, yeah.
explain the connection there.
Well, I think it was a good way to begin to talk about all the Irish scribes who kind of preserved European civilization in many ways simply by writing things down in the monasteries and preserving them in books like the Book of Kells and those kind of materials. At the time, across Europe, libraries were being burnt down by the so-called barbarians. So to have people in Ireland and particularly living on the remote islands surrounding the country to write all this down, I mean, if it weren't for people like St. Patrick, we would not have any knowledge, or barely any knowledge, of those ancient civilizations and ancient cultures that lived on the island before them.
Yeah, yeah. There's a road here in Letterkenny, Dr. Oliver Plunkett Road, and there's in the chapter on skulls and heads, you feature St. Oliver Plunkett, and he came to a particularly sad end.
Yeah, I mean, as many of you readers, listeners will know, I mean, his head is still preserved in Drogheda. I mean, it wasn't quite as sad end because he was finally made into a saint in 1975, about 700 years after he lived. But he was the last victim of the Popish plot, which was a conspiracy that stoked anti-Catholic hysteria between 1678 and 81. So he was arrested and done for treason, and he was hanged as well. You're right, there is a lot of hangings and beheadings
Mm-hmm.
in this book, but of course his head is still quite preserved. You can still go and see that if you're in the area.
Well, listen, there's, I mean, that's just one of the many fascinating stories and characters that are within the book, and it's in a way, and I suppose it's like a social history almost. Well, there's a lot of social history in here.
Yeah, I mean, I tried to get a good mix of everything. There's obviously a medical and a health history aspect, but there's a lot of social history. I cover a lot of folklore. I retell the political history of Ireland in a different and new way. And it does begin in ancient times and takes us all the way up to more modern times. So it's intended for everyone. It's a good entry point, I think, into Irish history, whether you know quite a lot about it or maybe you're a beginner. I like to think it's an accessible entry point
Yeah,
into a very complex national history.
absolutely. Yeah, very accessible. Okay, it's called, just hold up there the camera as well, A History of Ireland in 10 Body Parts. Dr. Ian Miller, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Get with the best. Virgin Media, Ireland's best broadband with full fibre and speeds of 2 gig, is now available in Donegal. Check your area